Hello everybody, welcome to Mailbag Monday for January 7th, 2019. This email actually came as part of a response to a post from yesterday. This is from Judy Garcelis, and I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, and she asks, tips for playing the 3.5, 8.5 when you do not have those frets. I know you stretch the string to play in the fret, but it's hard to get it right. And I have a very, very good answer for that. Judy, thank you very much for that comment. And this is the serious trick on how to play notes we don't actually have on the mountain dulcimer. If you look down here on this particular Folkcraft Instruments double dulcimer, you see I've got one side that's fully chromatic. That means all the notes are here. So these are all half steps as we go up the scale. And if you were to play that, you'd hear that half-step succession, like somebody walking up a flight of stairs. So there are 12 half steps in the chromatic scale, and then of course the octave would bring us up to 13. Now as you look across from the chromatic fretboard, we have our diatonic fretboard, not straight diatonic because I do have the 1.5 fret and I do have the 6.5 fret. But this is not fully chromatic, obviously, and you can go directly across and compare the two fretboards and see where notes have been removed. Here, here, here. In fact, any place you've got a wide space on the fretboard is where you've got a whole step. If you take two half steps and put them together, you end up with a whole step. Same wide space in between your fret spaces there. So instead of going up a half step, if I just omit that half step and go directly from the open to this fret, that's what a whole step sounds like. But half steps all sound like the Jaws theme. And we can do that over here on this side with some of ours. Now take a look. If you were to go from the 2nd fret, you'd find that you do have a half step right there because at the 3rd fret, because we have a narrow space. In the scale, that's going to work out for us as a half step. That's in the key of D, or in DAD tuning. That's F sharp and that's G, and those notes are a half step apart. So anywhere that you've got a narrow space, you can pull that interval, which is called a minor second. However, if you go from one wide space to another wide space, the interval you'll be playing there is called a major second. So if you ever find yourself searching for that note, that half-step note that you don't have in the scale, the first thing you have to figure out is, do you have either one of the notes? Do you have the bottom note and are just missing the top, or do you have the top note and you're missing the bottom? It's easier to engineer this thing from the bottom, so let's find the note we're looking for. And let's say we want to take that up a half step. If we go up to the next fret and you got a wide space, that's not going to be able to happen. So we then have to create a half step by bending the note that we just plucked. You want to push that melody string out as far as you can to where you're touching that middle string, and that'll give you about a half a step. It'll take some practice to get it pretty close to being on the money, but you can still get that half step. And it's going to be easier from the middle of the fretboard as opposed to playing close to the nut and close to the bridge. The bridge won't be too bad because the strings are pretty pliable still there. But you'll find that trying to bend notes at the 1st or 2nd fret can be really difficult because of how much tension there is in the strings. It can be done, but not very comfortably. It can be done a lot easier on the middle string because the middle string in DAD tuning or 158 tuning has less pressure on it. There's there's more play basically. So you can actually get in there and do that, but it's really still tough because the string only wants to move on this side versus towards the nut. It's really anchored right there at the nut, so it's very difficult to get it to move. The further away you get from that, however, And of course, you'll find right towards the middle of the fretboard is where the least amount of tension is going to be on the string, and you can bend it all over the place. That includes the bass string as well. So my first suggestion would be to practice finding that half step. And in order to nail it, if you're not used to listening for the sound of that interval, is to put your tuner on and then just playing the original note and then bend it and then see if that tuner gives you a, if you're playing A, then say it's going to give you an A sharp, and see if you can get that needle to be right there in the center. And then same thing with B. And then if you bend the B upwards, you'll actually get a C. You won't get a B sharp. You'll actually get a C natural, because B and C and E and F are both a half step apart, even though they are whole letter names. Just so beware of that B and C and E and F are both a half step apart. Other than that, you should get sharp every single time you bend a note upwards, and you can use your tuner to check that. The other thing is, typically when you're looking to get this note, it's going to come in the middle of some really pretty intricate piece of music where you don't want to hear the sliding up and the sliding down out of that pitch. If you're trying to play something like Hard Times by Stephen Foster. Now the note that we're actually looking for in the key of D is not in the key of D. It's a G sharp. So it's an accidental, but that's the way that we know the song. And do that again, cleaner. Now I can play it on the middle string because I've got a G sharp right there and all the notes I need to play that phrase. But when I'm playing chords in the arrangement that I do of Hard Times, I'm playing it down here and I don't have a G sharp. So I want to bend the 3rd fret string at the melody string and bend it to get the G sharp. It's very hard to do because it's very, very tense right there. So I've actually worked it to where I'm leaving that G sharp alone because it's just so hard to hit there. Or I might work it in where I start to play it up here to get the G sharp in there. But it's one of those things where if it's really bugging you, you want to have that note, you're going to have to fight for it and find a place that'll either be comfortable for you or some place where you can muscle through. A good example of how I use these half steps in a piece of music would be my arrangement of If We Hold On Together from the movie The Land Before Time. And there is a big modulation in the middle of that piece where I have to do some bending. I try and do it as straight on as possible, meaning you want to be able to hit the note and then bend the note and hit it again and go back and forth without hearing that slide up. Sometimes you can avoid getting a little bit of that slide up there, and maybe you can work that into the arrangement. But in thinking about this piece from The Land Before Time, here's how I use the slide or the bend in order to get the piece and all the notes that I want to have in there present. So the first one I'm able to hit pretty easily. I get in there first and hit the note. But when I come up here, instead of trying to separate it, I go ahead and I slide up into it because I figure one little slide in the piece is not going to kill it at all. And then I move on from there. But, if I wanted to, I could go and then play the rest of the piece. But it's too choppy sounding for me, and so I have opted to slide it at that point. It's not too bad of a slide, so I don't think people really notice that much about it. Now, if you're doing that in the middle of a really seriously classical piece, it could be a little, I don't know, out of place. It could be a little wonky sounding. So it's up to you. So in manner of putting this into practice, what I would recommend is going up the fretboard and basically practicing getting all of your chromatic notes just by walking up the frets. Once again, don't worry too much about the first fret because it's really super hard to get there, but maybe on the middle string, and you're not going to be able to get that half step up from that, or the 0.5 fret. You're just not going to be able to get that from here because you can't bend downwards. But we can go from here. Now, if you try and bend this, that's the same note as the 1.5 fret. If you don't have the 1.5 fret, then bending this note will give you the half step up that the 1.5 fret gives you. If you've got these narrow frets all in a row, just go ahead and walk them up because they're fully chromatic. And then when your next fret's going to be a whole step, that's when you start bending again. Remember, bending from here is just going to get you into this next half step. So you can just walk up from here and then start bending again. And just make it a habit. Go up through your half steps, walk through them. When you encounter your next fret as a whole step, go ahead and start bending. And then when you know your next fret is going to be a half step, then just go ahead and play the frets as normal. Going downwards. It's a little bit different here because even though we are going down and our next fret's a whole step, we already know that C, or sorry, well, in the middle string, this would actually be G to F sharp. We know that's a half step apart. So you're going to bend going down, or you're not going to bend going down. And then, well, the difference being here is you can't bend downwards, so you'd have to skip some notes. So you actually have to be on the back side of the note closest to the nut in order to capture that, because once again we cannot bend a string downwards in order to get that bending. So and then back up again. And you can practice that so you can get it nice and smooth. So it becomes second nature. If you have to grab any of those sharps there, you can simply know exactly how far to pull your string back and how to bend it before you pluck it. To get it to sound as good as possible, and also how to make a slight correction once you get that bend in order to tune it if you're there long enough. All kinds of little adjustments you can make in there. Notice that on the middle string I'm pulling towards me. That gives you a bit more control. Same thing with the bass string. So if I'm doing the famous blues bass walk up, I'm actually having to bend and get the G sharp there. In between the G sharp and the A, I'm letting go while I'm not plucking so I can get as much separation as possible. And if you get a little bit of a slide in there, it's not really a bad thing. And that's it. Practice bending those notes. Practice how to run consecutive chromatic walks up and down the fretboard. And then remember, if you're looking for a piece of music and you're working through it and you don't have that note and you know it's going to be the Jaws theme, meaning it's going to be a half step up, just find the bottom of those notes and then bend that particular note. And I'd say most of the time you're going to end up picking the note that you don't have available to you. You can even do this in the middle of chords. That can be a little bit more difficult, but if you need to change a chord from a major to a minor, oftentimes you can bend the third and get what you're looking for. That might invite a dulcimerica episode sometime here in the new year. So I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. And of course, anything else that you'd like to see, please let me know, and I'll be happy to put it out there, not only on Dulce America, but right here on Mailbag Monday. If you have your questions, please send them to me at bingfutch@yahoo.com, or you can send them to me through Patreon, and I'll be happy to get them in the queue and out here on view for everybody to check out. So thanks again, everybody. Hope you're having a great, happy new year so far. I'll be back with more later on this week. Until then, practice on. We'll see you soon.